I have a question about intrinsic value. It comes from comments that you made in your annual report this year. In there, you described the extraordinary skills of a JIT in judging risk. When I think about Berkshire and its ability to increase intrinsic value, it seems to me that judging risk has been at least as important as an ability to calculate a net present value. So my question to each of you is, would you give us some comments on how you think about risk?
Well, we think of business risk in terms of what can happen, say, 5, 10, 15 years from now that will destroy or modify or reduce the economic strengths that we perceive currently exist in a business. And some businesses it's impossible to figure, at least it's impossible for us to figure, and then we don't even think about it then. We are enormously risk averse. We are not risk averse in terms of losing $1 billion if there were an earthquake in California today. And we're thinking of writing a policy, for example, in the next week or so on a primary insurance risk of over $1 billion. That doesn't bother us as long as the math is in our favor. But in terms of doing a group of transactions like that, we are very risk averse. In other words, we want to think that we've got a mathematical edge in every transaction, and we think that we'll do enough transactions over a lifetime so that no matter what the result of any single one, that the group expectancy gets almost a certainty. When we look at businesses, we try to think of what can go wrong with them. We try to look at businesses that are good businesses now, and we think about what can go wrong with them. If we can think of very much that can go wrong with them, we just forget it. We are not in the business of assuming a lot of risk in businesses. That doesn't mean we don't do it inadvertently and make mistakes, because we do. But we don't intentionally or willingly, voluntarily go into situations where we perceive really significant risks that the business is going to change in a major way. And that gets down to what you probably heard me talk about before, is what kind of a moat is around the business. Every business that we look at, we think of as an economic castle. And castles are subject to marauders. And in capitalism, any castle you have, whether it's razor blades or soft drinks or whatever, you have to expect that. I mean, you want the capitalistic system to work in a way that millions of people are out there with capital thinking about ways to take your castle away from you and appropriate it for their own use. And then the question is, what kind of a moat do you have around that castle that protects it? See's Candy has a wonderful moat around its castle. And Chuck Huggins has taken that moat, which he took charge of in 1972, and he has widened that moat every year. He throws crocodiles and sharks and piranhas in the moat, and it gets harder and harder for people to swim across and attack the castle. So they don't do it. If you look since 1972, Forrest Mars tried with Ethel M., 20 years ago, and I hate to think of how much money it cost him to try that. And he was a very experienced businessman. So we think in terms of that moat and the ability to keep its width and its impossibility of being crossed as the primary criterion of a great business. And to our managers, we say we want the moat widened every year. That does not necessarily mean that the profit is more this year than last year, because it won't be sometimes. But if the moat is widened every year, the business will do very well. When we see a moat that's tenuous in any way, getting back to your question, it's just too risky. We don't know how to evaluate that, and therefore we leave it alone. We think all of our businesses, virtually all of our businesses, have pretty darn good moats, and we think the managers are widening them. Charlie?
How could you say it better?
Oh. Here, have some peanut brittle on that one. Okay.